I thought this image would be very fitting for the article I'm about to read to you that came to my phone just a couple of minutes ago. So you see right here, it's the American flag and it has a bunch of bullet holes in it and it's kind of dirty and grungy and everything like that. Well, this article just came through on my Yahoo News app and it came via the New York Times, and it says inside a deadly American summer. Basically what it is an overview of these mass shootings that have occurred for the entire summer 2019, starting at Memorial Day and going all the way up until I believe Labor Day. And I just read some of it already, and it ain't looking too good for the for a certain community. But you know, they'll gloss over it as if it didn't happen. But let me get into it. It says mass shootings this summer came one after the next, sometimes only hours apart, and hurled the nation to an agonizing routine, a sudden burst of violence, followed by solemn mourning and pleas for change, and then another burst somewhere else. There were ones that rattled the whole country in an El Paso, Texas Walmart, on the streets of Dayton, Ohio, along a highway near Odessa, Texas. But there were still others, eruptions that plunged one town or one neighborhood into grief, but went mostly unnoticed elsewhere. In the end, even in a country numb to the daily toll of homicides, the scale of this violent summer was shocking. There were 26 mass shootings between Memorial Day and Labor Day, leaving 126 people dead and dozens more injured. There were close to 2 such shootings a week, at a rate of more than 1 death a day. The violence touched 18 states and huge cities and rural counties. Among those killed were a 3-year-old girl at a house in the Miami suburbs and a 90-year-old man shopping in El Paso. There were people enjoying the summer at a house party in New Mexico and a festival in California. And there were people just going about their daily routines, watching television, settling into bed, driving down the highway. Then came the bullets, the sirens, and the tears. It's like a great awakening for many people in terms of realizing how much America has changed, said Reverend Renard Allen, a pastor in Dayton, who presided over the funeral of one of 9 people killed there. The world we live in now is one in which no place is safe. No lives really matters when it comes to violence. Let me stop right there. Now they have a big concern when it comes to these shootings and everything like that. But guess what? Whenever something happens with black people and it's of a concern, they'll bring up Chicago. They'll bring up Baltimore and this, that, and the third, where they typically hone their crosshairs in on when it comes to quote unquote black on black violence. Notice that all these places that are being talked about, none of them happened in Baltimore or Chicago. They happened in other places where it was a vast majority of white people around, and the people carrying them out for the most part were Caucasian. This is the quote unquote dominant society biggest wake up call. Who knew it would have came in the form of these mass shootings? It came in the form of those opioids as well. But here's the next one right here. And you wonder why they created that PSA with that school shooting. It says, the massacre set off calls for new gun laws and stricter background checks in state houses and in Congress. But as weeks passed with no bipartisan consensus, little change and the issue started to fade once more. The New York Times analyzed every shooting in the United States, and that resulted in 3 or more deaths, including the gunmen from Memorial Day to Labor Day, the unofficial summer season. Now, it's interesting that they mention Memorial Day and Labor Day. If y'all have followed me for a while, I've always said that on those 2 days, it's certain days that you have to look for. Those 2 in particular, but there's others, but I'm focused on those 2. Notice that this year, because of all these mass shootings that have happened, they did not once talk about so-called 50 plus people getting shot in Chicago on Memorial Day weekend or 100 plus people dying over Labor Day weekend like they usually do. It was like a complete 180 where the shootings that occurred during those times were carried out by palm colored individuals, and most of the people who got killed were palm colored themselves. But they want to talk about quote unquote black on black crime all the time. They will bring up Chicago. They will bring up Baltimore. They'll bring up any predominantly black city, especially one that they feel is also a heavy democratic, or as I call it, democratic location as well. But a lot of the places that these shootings are occurring in are in red states. Not all of them, but many of them. And they're carried out by people who would lean more politically to the right. But they will not call that out. And I don't expect them to. I would be shocked, but I don't expect them to. So I'm not. It says the New York Times analyzed every shooting in the United States that resulted in 3 or more deaths, including the government. Okay, I've read that part ever. Though every shooting was distinct, patterns emerged. In 3 of the 4 deadliest killings, the gunman used military-style weapons. In more than half the mass killings, the suspect had a familial or romantic relationship with at least one victim. In every case, authorities identified a suspect, and every one of those suspects was male. Now, let me go back. It said in every case, authorities identified a suspect. Now, when they talk about Chicago and they say that all these shootings occurred in Chicago, they never, ever, ever identify a suspect. They just have all these bodies just piling up. For one, we don't even know who the people are. We don't know any of the victims. Whenever there's a shooting that occurs in Chicago and they find a suspect, notice that it's not these wild numbers that the media puts out there. It's probably 1 or 2 people. But when they put these numbers out where they say like 20 plus people got killed over this weekend, who waits to the weekend to do a shooting? If they're going to do a mass shooting, they're going to do it any day of the week. They're going to mainly do it during the week because that's when it's the busiest. It's a business week. People are out. People are at work. On the weekend, people are off work mostly, and they're probably with their family. And if it's a holiday weekend, a lot of the stores are closed unless there's some kind of holiday where the stores are open and there's a sale. See, they don't expect people like myself and those listening to figure this stuff out. It's not rocket science. It's common sense. They said with the work week almost over and the summer in sight, a man with 2 handguns stormed through municipal offices in Virginia Beach, Virginia on the last afternoon of May, and he began shooting. And that's another thing. It was the summertime. Kids, for the most part, are out of school. Most families are getting prepared to go on vacation. If this was like it's not like it's right now where when school's back in. It says employers across the nation have invested in elaborate security systems to keep dangerous people out. But as is often the case, this threat came from someone on the inside. The gunman, a longtime city engineer, has shown glimpses of being volatile before. A violent encounter at work, a hasty resignation email, he was able to walk right into the building. Hardening your target with physical protection isn't going to protect you from a guy who has a key card access, says Catherine Schweit, a former FBI official who studies mass killings. The victims included Ryan Keith Cox, a utilities worker with a golden singing voice who died shielding colleagues, Richard Nettleton, an Army vet, and Herbert Snelling, the only victim who was not a city worker who had come to ask questions about a permit. Their deaths were the first in what felt like a summer-long siege, the start of a bleak routine of panicked 911 calls and mourning. Now, what's interesting is that the first shooting that they mentioned, with this one in Virginia Beach, I think that was one of the only few, or probably the only one, that I think the shooter was, I want to say was black, and maybe someone can correct me. I think that was the only person that happened to be black. And ironically, that's who they decided to lead this story with. It says the police are trained to race toward gunfire and take on a gunman. Are they really? Because how many times have they given palm-colored males in particular a pass when they've had a gun pointed at them by them and they want to take their sweet time? But when it's a black man or anyone black in general, they want to get physical and the person doesn't even have a gun. It says even when their handguns are overmatched by a high overpowered weapon, in 3 of the summer's 4 deadliest shootings, an AR style or AK gun style was used. That included the massacre in Dayton, Ohio, where officers shot and fatally wounded a gunman with 32 seconds of his opening fire on a packed street lined with bars, nightclubs, and shops. The toll was devastating. Using an AR-style weapon, the gunman killed 9 people in barely a half a minute. Thomas McNichols, a father of four who played kickball at family gatherings, was enjoying a night out with friends when he was killed. Allen, who presided over McNichols' funeral, said the experience brought him face to face with a level of pain that is almost too intense to describe. "We're reeling," Allen said. "We're recovering, but we are reeling." The television was playing. There was food on the living room table. A man had killed four members of his wife's family. "It could have been any neighborhood in this town," said Lieutenant Paul Joseph of the San Jose, California police, who examined the crime that scene in June. "It could have been any neighborhood in any town." The case was not an outlier. More than half of the mass killing suspects this summer had an intimate connection to at least one victim. Among them, a teenager in Alabama accused of killing 5 relatives, a father in Iowa who killed his wife and 2 school-age sons, a man in Oklahoma charged with killing his wife and stepchildren. The sheriff in Marshall County, Oklahoma, said he had never heard of trouble from the man who lived on rural Page Road near Medill until deputies found the man's wife dead in the master bedroom and his 2 stepchildren killed in their beds. He wasn't on our radar at all. Of course he wasn't, because when you put out this image that you are this picture perfect family, no one would suspect you. Such is often the case in familicides, a disturbingly common type of mass killing, but the sort that draws less attention than those involving strangers in public places. Though motives are often complex, researchers have found that many mass killers share a history of hating women, assaulting wives, girlfriends, and female family members, or sharing misogynistic views online. So it sounds to me like they're describing incels, or basically that what is his name? Elliot Rodger. I always call him the king of the incels. I swear that video of him in that car is so eerie. It's like scarier than some of the so-called horror movies that come out today. In more than 20 years patrolling Marshall County, population 16,800, Cryer could only recall one other triple homicide. Investigators believe that case was also rooted in domestic violence. Hate crimes report across the nation increased 3 years in a row, with 7,100 incidents in 2017, the most recent year for which data is available. A vast majority of those crimes did not result in deaths, but this summer saw one of the worst hate-driven massacres in modern U.S. history at a Walmart in El Paso, which police believe was motivated by hatred of Hispanic people. Armed with an AK-47 style rifle, the gunman stormed through the aisles of the busy store near the U.S.-Mexico border, spraying dozens of shoppers with bullets. He killed Jordan Achando, a mother who used her body to protect her infant. He killed Javier Rodriguez, who played high school soccer. He killed Margie Record, whose funeral was attended by hundreds after her husband extended an open invitation. He killed 19 more citizens of the United States, Mexico, and Germany. El Paso police said the actions of one man inside the store may have kept the death toll from going higher, though they have not provided precise details of his actions. Are they talking about that black cop? I mean, not the black cop, that black guy who helped those kids? I wonder if that's who they're talking about. It says he was wearing a short sleeve dress shirt and a brown hat. The detectives were hoping to find the man, interview him, and honor him. Well, I don't think that was him, because he wasn't wearing that day, so that's somebody else. We believe this hero helped save several lives, including an infant, the police said in a mid-August Facebook post that has been shared 4,700 times. A month later, his identity remains unknown. The list of shootings examined by the Times include killings tracked by the Gun Violence Archive, a nonprofit group that focuses on shootings and verified by law enforcement records, interviews with authorities, and local media outlets. While several of the summer's 26 mass shootings dominated headlines, others, like a triple homicide in rural Pennsylvania, received little national attention. Jesse Northrup's life was in crisis. He was suffering from anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. He had stopped taking his medication. He had just been fired from his job at a meatpacking plant. Then on June 13th, Northrup went to a store and bought a Smith & Wesson .40 caliber handgun. A day later, he fired 4 fatal bullets at his mother, his stepfather, another man, and then at himself. Mass shootings are hard to prevent, dangerous to interrupt, and devastating in scope, but they have usually easily to solve. Whether the attacks ended up in a shootout, suicide, or arrest, none of the suspects in the summer mass shootings avoided detection. This summer, suspects included a 14-year-old boy in Alabama and a 62-year-old man in Georgia, but no women or girls. Experts said it is exceedingly rare for women to carry out mass shootings. In many cases, including a triple homicide in August, at a house in San Antonio, the gunman killed himself. In others, including in Virginia Beach, police killed the gunman. And even when the gunman flees, police often do not have to look far to make an arrest. It was a chaotic scene in Burlington, North Carolina, a barrage of bullets at an apartment complex. 3 young men dead, witnesses pointing toward where the gunman had run. Soon, officers found Haquan Parker, age 26, who was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Parker, an acquaintance of the victims, had killed a man as a teenager and was convicted of second-degree murder. He was released from prison after about 7 years. Shootings at U.S. schools have fueled much of the national conversation about gun violence, but this summer children were killed in their homes, at a shopping center, on a highway, and at the Gilroy Garlic Festival in California. The man who brought an AK-47 style rifle to the Gilroy Garlic Festival, a joyous mix of food and music and a children's games, did not seem to care whom he shot. He had plotted against religious institutions, federal buildings, and political groups from both major parties. Then, for reasons domestic terrorism investigators have not detailed, he settled on the annual Garlic Festival. Kayla Salazar, one of the 2 school children killed that day, was about to turn 14. Stephen Romero, age 6, loved Legos and Batman. Mass killings can be inspired by bigotry, by domestic anger, by botched drug deals, or in one case in California, by an argument over golf. But sometimes, including in Las Vegas in 2017, the site of the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history, the reasons for a massacre are never discovered. The same has been true in Des Moines, Iowa, where police accused a man of killing 3 people, including 2 children, in a house this summer. Gracia Daniela Alvarado Flores was 11. Her brother Everett Jose Meja Flores was 5. Their mom died too. The suspect, now charged with murder, lived in the same house but was not related to the victims. The police still do not know why he did it. The shootings came one after the other. On June 23rd, South Carolina and California. On the last weekend in July, Wisconsin and California. On August 3rd, El Paso, and then early the next morning, Dayton. Even in a country numb to the daily toll of gun violence, the pace of mass death struck deep. When Ohio's governor spoke at a vigil in August, Dayton residents drowned him out with shouts of "do something." Before the end of that month, there would be 7 more mass killings across the nation. By Labor Day weekend, the national debate about gun control reopened by El Paso and Dayton have returned to a familiar stalemate. Democrats wanted stronger background checks and in some cases an assault weapons ban. Many Republicans did not. Sweeping national action seemed unlikely. Then a man fleeing a traffic stop began shooting randomly at motorists between Odessa and Midland, Texas, using a military-style rifle. ABC News reported that he bought it through a private sale loophole after failing a background check because of a mental illness, and I'm going to put that in air quotes. And the summer ended much as it had began, with a new round of panicky 911 calls, another set of wrenching vigils, and a new wave of pleas for change. Now, that was a pretty lengthy article, but I definitely had to read all of it. Like I said, most of these shootings have been carried out by the palm-colored class for the most part. This is a huge stain on them, but they have all this time to worry about what it is we got going on. At this point, all y'all can do for us is cut the check, because they got too many issues going on over there. They got them opioids, they got low birth rates, and they got these mass shootings, and it seems like there's not going to be any end in sight. And like I said, the school year has just started up a couple weeks ago. Ends in May for some and June for others. That's going to be a long trip from here to June. And anywhere else that they feel like doing whatever it is. And like I said, they said they don't know why many people want to do mass shootings. I'll tell you, they get inspired. I'm surprised they didn't put that in this article. A lot of them say they are inspired from other mass shootings, especially Columbine. Or many of them just have that bloodthirst to kill. Or like I always say, any day that ends in Y will do for them. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments, and I'll talk to you in the next one.